Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
The fight started somewhere outside Florence, on a narrow stretch of road framed by cypress trees and golden hills that looked like they'd been painted for postcards. We were supposed to be heading back from a vineyard tour, all of us a little tipsy from overpriced wine and fake laughter, but the mood had shifted like weather. I can't even remember what I said that set Jack off. Maybe it was the way I rolled my eyes when he made another one of his macho little jokes in front of the guys. Or maybe it was that I didn't laugh when Rick told the story about the drunk American girl they left in Venice last summer. Either way, it escalated fast. Words turned into insults, and suddenly, I wasn't just the buzzkill, I was the problem. Jack slammed the brakes hard enough to jolt my spine, and the car rocked as he turned toward me, his mouth twisted in that smirk I used to think was charming. "You need to cool off," he said, gesturing at the empty road. "Go walk it off. We'll pick you up down the road." Rick and Donnie laughed, like we were on some damn reality show, like this was all part of the entertainment. Chase looked unsure, but said nothing, just kept sipping from his beer like the coward he was. I stepped out of the car in a mix of disbelief and pride. My blood was hot, and I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me beg. I closed the door quietly, too quietly, and started walking. I thought they were bluffing. I thought the car would creep behind me after a few seconds and Jack would roll down the window with that same stupid grin, say something like, "All right, princess, get in." But they didn't. I heard laughter and the squeal of tires as they pulled away fast, trailing dust and a blast of classic rock out the open windows. And then they were gone. Just like that, I was alone. No phone, it was in my purse, which was still on the back seat. No wallet, no ID, not even a water bottle. Just the clothes I'd worn that morning, a lightweight linen dress and sandals that now felt utterly stupid and impractical. The sun was beginning to drop, casting long shadows across the hills, and the road around me was dead silent except for the chirp of crickets and the occasional whisper of wind in the grass. I stood there for a long time, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 30, waiting to hear the low hum of their engine returning. But it never came. The sky turned amber, then bruised purple, and still I stood there, until a mosquito bit my arm and snapped me out of my trance. I started walking again, not toward anywhere specific, just away from that stretch of road and everything on it. The anger faded quickly, replaced with something quieter but more dangerous resolve. Somewhere along that walk, something broke in me. Not in a tragic way. Not in the way they might have imagined, like I'd crumble on the side of the road and cry until I forgave them. No, it broke clean, like a bone snapping straight. I realized just how little I meant to Jack and his crew of frat house leftovers. I wasn't a person to them, I was a prop in their little ego theater. The wife. The punchline. The one who could be the target of a cruel joke because she'd always come back. Well, not this time. I passed an abandoned fruit stand, the crates half rotted and swarmed with flies, and considered curling up behind it for the night. But something in me kept moving forward, a stubborn spark that said, "Don't stop until it hurts." I walked until the sandals blistered my feet and the stars came out one by one, blinking silently in the vast, unfamiliar sky. That's when I saw the lights in the distance, a tiny cluster of buildings, maybe a village, maybe a mirage. I headed toward them like a woman possessed. A local bar was still open. I walked in, dusty and wild-eyed, and the bartender stared at me for a long second before saying something in Italian I didn't understand. I just held up both hands and said, "No money. No phone. Just help." He hesitated, then nodded, disappearing into the back. A minute later, an old woman came out, she must have been in her 70s, and handed me a frayed wool coat and a small glass of water like I was her own daughter. I nearly cried. But I didn't. Not yet. I slept that night behind the church, curled up on a stone bench, wrapped in that coat like it was armor. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I planned. Let them laugh, I thought. Let them laugh their stupid asses off all the way back to Florence. Let them think they'd made their point or taught me a lesson. They had no idea what they'd actually done. They didn't just leave me on a road. They gave me a reason. I didn't go back. Not that night. Not ever. The bench behind the church was made of stone, cold even through the borrowed coat, and I remember how the wind kept pulling at my hair like it wanted to take a piece of me too, just like Jack did, just like they all did when they left me there like a forgotten souvenir. The village slept around me while I stared at the stained glass window above, trying to imagine who I was supposed to be now, because the woman who boarded the plane to Italy a week ago, she died somewhere back on that road, abandoned beside an olive grove and the wreckage of her self-worth. I didn't sleep much, but somehow morning came anyway, slow and quiet and gray. Marta, the old woman from the bar, found me still curled up in her coat and said nothing, just pressed a warm piece of bread into my hand and touched my shoulder the way my own mother used to before she died. That touch nearly broke me open, but I swallowed it back down like I always did. There wasn't time for falling apart. Not yet. Inside the coat pocket was a handkerchief tied around 3 old coins and a single gold hoop earring, which must have belonged to someone Marta loved once. I didn't ask. I just tucked it into my bra like a secret and limped toward the small market square, dragging my blistered feet like something hunted. There was a man by the bus stop selling tickets and small packets of sunflower seeds, and I pointed at a sign that said Bari, though I didn't even know where that was. He said something in Italian I couldn't understand, and I held out the only thing I had left of value, my wedding necklace. It was a delicate little chain with a tiny diamond heart that Jack had given me for our 5th anniversary, back when I thought gifts meant something and promises mattered. The man examined it like it was counterfeit, then shrugged and muttered, €250. I nodded, pretending I knew what he'd said. I figured €250 was, what, like $500? Close enough. He handed me a crumpled ticket and a receipt with numbers I couldn't read, then pointed at the bus like I might try to board a cow if he didn't. The ride to Bari took hours. I watched the hills flatten and the language on signs change, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel afraid. I felt invisible. And being invisible, it turned out, was a kind of power. No one stared. No one whispered. No one cared. I ate sunflower seeds until my lips stung with salt, then threw the empty packet out the window and imagined it floating away to sea, just like I was about to. The port was noisy and confusing, and I almost turned back twice, but something in me kept moving forward, like I'd already committed a crime and running was the only option left. The ferry smelled like diesel and fish, and I bought a one-way ticket with no idea where it went, because that was the point. If I didn't know, they couldn't either. We docked in Patras just after sunrise, the sky bleeding orange over the sea like a wound that wouldn't close. I stepped off with 1 bag and 0 plans, except a faint memory from college, a girl named Elena who once bought me shots on my birthday and said, "If you ever get stuck in Europe, find me in Athens." I didn't even know if she still lived there, but it was the only thread I had, so I pulled. I took 2 more buses, slept sitting up next to a man who smelled like garlic and cigarettes, and arrived in Athens with a stiff neck and a headache that wouldn't quit. I found Elena's old bar by accident, wandering streets until I saw the name and something in me cracked wide open. I stepped inside with no expectations, and there she was, older, sure, but still the same Elena, with that half-laughing, half-suspicious look that said she'd seen too much but still gave a damn. I told her everything except the parts that hurt too much to say out loud. She listened, then poured me a drink and said, "The couch is yours, but only if you help with the night shift." I nodded. I would have agreed to clean toilets if it meant I didn't have to see Jack's face again. That night, she cut my hair short, dyed it a rich auburn, and took a picture for some fake ID her cousin could get me. I deleted every trace of myself online, emails, social media, everything. Watching my old life disappear one password at a time felt like ripping off a bandage that had been festering for years. The first time I looked in the mirror after the dye set, I'd barely recognized myself, and that was the goal. I wasn't the wife anymore, the one who waited, who begged, who tolerated. I was someone else entirely now, someone who'd been forged in the heat of betrayal and decided to come out sharper. The bar was busy that weekend, full of tourists and loud voices, and I learned to pour drinks and laugh at jokes I didn't understand. I spoke just enough Greek to fake it, and Elena covered for the rest. I slept 4 hours a night and worked 12, and slowly, I started to feel like a person again, though not the same one. One night, I was wiping down glasses behind the counter when a man walked in, not particularly tall or handsome, but with a calmness that stood out against the chaos. He ordered a drink in perfect Greek, then glanced at me and smiled, not the way men usually do, but like he saw something familiar. After a moment, he tilted his head slightly and said, "You're not from here, are you?" And that's when I realized I wasn't just hiding. I was becoming. The first few weeks in Athens passed like smoke through fingers, fast, warm, and hard to hold on to, especially when every single moment felt borrowed and fragile, like if I breathed too loudly, the world would remember I didn't belong here. But Elena didn't ask questions, and that was worth more than any therapy session I ever sat through back in the States, where people asked how you felt, but didn't wait around for the answer. She let me move at my own speed, handed me work when I needed distraction, wine when I needed silence, and space when I didn't know what I needed at all. The man from the bar, the one with the patient eyes and the way of speaking that made everything sound like a secret being shared, came back again the next night. And the one after that. His name was Theo. He was a chef, ran a small place down the street that always smelled like grilled lemon and garlic, and he didn't flirt with me the way American men did. There was no puffed-up chest or rehearsed lines. Just this steady presence like he knew I'd bolt if he pushed even a little. One night, after closing, I found him sitting at the corner stool, already nursing a drink and humming something low under his breath. He didn't ask what time I finished or if I wanted company. He just said, "It's still warm out. Wanna walk to the beach?" And for once, I didn't overthink it. I just nodded and followed him out into the Athenian night, which was buzzing with scooters and music and the kind of thick, salty air that clung to your skin like a lover's hand. We sat in the sand, shoes off, pants rolled, the tide licking at our toes like it was tasting our regrets. He told me about his restaurant, his divorce, his daughter who lived with her mother in Thessaloniki, and how he still sent birthday cards even when they came back unopened. I told him almost nothing, just that I used to be married and now I wasn't. He didn't pry, just nodded slowly and said, "Some ghosts follow us better when we try to run." The next morning, there was an email from Jack sitting in my inbox like a landmine waiting to go off. No subject line. Just his name, staring at me like a slap. The first line was a joke, "You win." I'm officially worried. Then, "Where are you?" Then, "Is this a joke? Are you doing this to teach me a lesson?" And finally, like he'd tried every other tool in his pathetic emotional toolbox and had nothing left, "If you want a divorce, just say so." I didn't answer. I didn't even open the email a second time. I just deleted it, then emptied the trash folder, then shut the laptop like I was closing a coffin. Theo started coming around more often after that, sometimes just for a quick espresso, sometimes for a shared bowl of olives, once to fix a leaky pipe under the bar with a set of tools that looked older than both of us. He never asked me for anything, never reached for my hand or tried to kiss me. He just showed up, consistent as the tides. And somehow, that became everything. One night, after a particularly long shift that left my feet aching and my back sore, I walked into the storage room and found him sitting cross-legged on a stack of crates, holding a small Tupperware of roasted eggplant and rice. "Figured you wouldn't eat unless someone made you," he said, offering me a fork without standing. I sat beside him, knees touching, and we ate in silence until the last bite was gone and my head was resting against his shoulder like it had always belonged there. We didn't talk about what was happening between us. We didn't name it or define it or even question it, because neither of us wanted something we had to explain. It was easy, unspoken, a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. No expectations. No punishments. No one keeping score. Then one evening, as I was wiping down the bar and humming some stupid American song I hadn't heard since high school, Elena burst through the back door like a storm. Her face was pale, phone clutched tight in one hand, eyes wide like she'd just seen a ghost and wasn't sure it wouldn't follow her inside. She didn't speak at first, just shoved the phone toward me, the screen lit up with a blurry photo. It was Jack, standing outside a cafe. In Athens. The caption read, "Still searching." Thought I found something familiar. But it wasn't just that. It was what he was holding in his hand. My old bag. The leather one with the faded strap and the scratch near the zipper. The one I'd left behind in that car, back on that stupid road in Italy. He'd found it. Somehow, he'd found it. And if he found the bag, then he was close. Too close. I had known, deep down, that this moment would come, the moment when the past would finally catch up with me, not in a dramatic cinematic thunderstorm or some perfectly timed airport chase, but in a hot, stuffy cafe in the middle of Athens, where the fan over the door clicked like a metronome counting down the seconds to something I could no longer avoid. I walked in slowly, already sweating through my linen shirt, and I saw him before he saw me, Jack, sitting alone at a corner table, nursing a lukewarm coffee and scanning the room with the jittery alertness of someone who hasn't slept in days and no longer trusts the ground under his feet. He looked older, grayer. His once carefully trimmed beard now patchy and uneven, like he hadn't bothered to maintain the image he clung to for years, the confident husband, the one with the plan, the one who always got the last word. He looked smaller, too, like guilt had started eating away at the frame he'd built around himself with charm and arrogance. For one long second, I just stood there, wondering what kind of man comes halfway across the world chasing a woman he left stranded like trash on the side of a road. And then he looked up and saw me. His eyes widened, but he didn't speak right away, like he couldn't believe I was real, or maybe couldn't decide which version of me he was seeing, the girl who cried when he forgot their anniversary, or the woman who vanished without a trace and never looked back. "Hey," he said finally, soft like we were just waking up in bed together. "You look different." I sat down across from him without a word, folding my hands on the table and waiting. He cleared his throat, picked up his cup, then put it back down. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," he said, and I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so goddamn predictable. "No one means to be cruel," I said, finally meeting his eyes. "You just are." He winced like I'd slapped him, and for a split second, I wondered if he'd actually convinced himself this was all some kind of miscommunication, like I'd overreacted to being abandoned in a foreign country without money or a phone or so much as a goodbye. "The guys Rick, Donnie, Chase, they feel terrible," he said, as if that mattered. "They thought it was a prank, you know, a dumb joke. They never imagined you'd actually disappear." I leaned forward just slightly and smiled, the way you smile at a child who's trying to sell you something ridiculous. "Oh, did they fly to Greece too?" I asked, my voice light, almost amused. "Did they lose sleep? Did they spend weeks walking through unfamiliar streets hoping they didn't see my face on a missing person poster?" Jack looked down at his hands, and for a second, I thought he might actually apologize truly, fully apologize, but instead, he looked back up with those pleading eyes I used to fall for and said, "We can fix this. We can start over. Come home with me." I laughed, not politely or gently, but from deep in my stomach, like it was the funniest damn thing I'd ever heard. "Home," I said. "You think there's still a home left for you and me? You burned that bridge so thoroughly I couldn't even find the ashes." He leaned back, confused, hurt, and maybe just now realizing that the woman in front of him wasn't the same one he left behind. "I miss you," he said quietly. "I miss us." I let the silence stretch, watching him squirm beneath it, and then I said the thing I came there to say. "I've already filed the papers," I said, reaching into my bag and pulling out a small envelope. "And I've got something else." I slid the photo across the table slowly, watching his eyes track it like it might bite him. He picked it up, stared at it for several seconds, and then his face twisted into something between confusion and fear. "Is that Theo?" he asked, his voice suddenly tight, defensive. I nodded. "Yes," I said. "The chef. The man who's been helping me rebuild a life without you. The man who knows what it means to treat someone with care instead of contempt. Jack looked from the photo to me, and I could see the gears spinning in his head, trying to put together a story that made sense. One where he wasn't the villain, where he was still the husband fighting for a marriage. Instead of the joke who didn't realize the punchline had always been him. "You planned this," he said slowly, his voice thick with something that tasted like betrayal. "You disappeared on purpose." I leaned back in my chair, crossed my legs, and let the sun hit my face through the dusty window. "No," I said, almost kindly. "You gave me the reason. I just finally listened to it." Jack sat there, silent now, as if the photo in his hands had become some kind of proof that he wasn't in control anymore, that the game he started ended without him even realizing he was playing it. I stood up, threw a few euros on the table, and looked down at him one last time. "You wanted to see how I'd get back," I said. "Turns out I didn't." Then I walked out of that cafe without another word, without turning back, and left him there in his rumpled shirt and his empty cup, holding a picture of the man who had become everything he could never be. There's a particular kind of silence that follows a conversation you've rehearsed in your head 1,000 times, the kind where every word has already been sharpened, every reply already predicted, but somehow, when it actually happens, it still knocks the wind out of you like a punch to the gut you weren't braced for. That's the silence that hung in the air after I walked out of the cafe, leaving Jack with nothing but a photo of Theo and the look on his face, confused, wounded, and starting to understand that something far bigger had been moving underneath him this entire time. He followed me once, back to the bar, but he didn't step inside. Just stood outside on the opposite side of the street, like a tourist trying to make sense of a map he couldn't read. He watched me through the window as I poured drinks, laughed with Elena, handed a customer his change without so much as a flinch. He probably expected me to stumble, to panic, to fall apart now that he'd found me. What he didn't realize was that I'd already done all that, just not where he could see it. That part of me, the one who cried in airport bathrooms and begged herself not to call him at 2 in the morning, that version had been buried somewhere between Florence and Bari, and in her place stood someone far less forgiving. Later that night, Theo came to find me behind the bar, his hands still dusted with flour from the dinner rush at his restaurant. He nodded toward the door where Jack had been standing earlier, and I just shrugged. "He knows," I said, wiping down a glass that didn't really need cleaning. "He's starting to understand." Theo didn't ask for details, because he already knew them. In fact, he'd known them before I even got to Athens. You see, Theo wasn't just some kind stranger who stumbled into my life by coincidence, and he definitely wasn't just a sympathetic chef with perfect timing. Theo used to be a private investigator. That's what he did before he opened his little restaurant by the sea. He worked in the shadows, helping people disappear from the lives that tried to ruin them, from husbands like Jack, from situations that felt like cages padded with good intentions and cruelty disguised as love. What Jack didn't know, and what made his confusion all the more satisfying to watch, was that I had reached out to Theo before I ever boarded the ferry in Bari. It wasn't a panic move. It was a plan. Elena had given me his name years ago, in a drunken conversation I half remembered and never thought I'd need. "If you ever really need to get away," she'd said, "not just skip town but really disappear, call this guy." At the time I laughed. I didn't laugh when I found his number again scribbled on the back of an old Polaroid stuffed in my passport. I'd told Theo everything in one phone call, voice low and steady, no tears, just facts. He didn't ask why I stayed so long, didn't judge me for the years I spent trying to make something broken look whole. He just said, "I'll be waiting in Athens. You won't be alone." And I wasn't. From the second I stepped off that bus, he was there, guiding, protecting, building me a story that didn't include being someone's afterthought. So when Jack asked if Theo was just the man I was sleeping with, he couldn't have imagined the truth, that Theo was the one who helped me become someone else, who taught me how to hold a lie in my mouth until it tasted like truth, who reminded me that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's quiet and patient and plays the long game. Jack didn't come back the next day, or the day after that. He probably flew home eventually, tail between his legs, Too proud to tell his friends that the woman they left behind didn't just survive, she orchestrated an entire second life, just out of their reach, and didn't once ask them to come looking. I imagined him sitting in some first-class seat, staring at the seatbelt sign and wondering how the hell he'd missed all the signs, how the joke had flipped without him noticing, how the punchline had turned into a knife. A week later, Elena handed me a postcard with no return address. Just 3 words, all in blocky, desperate handwriting. You win. Always. I slipped it into the trash without reading it again. I didn't respond. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Some people say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I think they're wrong. I think it's better when it's slow-cooked over a summer in Greece, served across 2 countries, 3 fake names, and with one hell of a sunset view. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I just vanished and let the silence do all the talking. Now, I work 3 nights a week at the bar and help Theo at the restaurant on Sundays. We don't talk about the past. We don't need to. We built something out of the ruins, something small and solid and ours. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I'll hear Jack's voice calling my name down some hallway, but it's always just the sea wind and the soft hum of the city. Did I love him? Once. Do I miss him? Sometimes, when I'm tired or the wine's too strong or a song sneaks up on me in the middle of a shift. Would I do it all again? Hell yes.